Hello guys, welcome to my channel. So today I'll be showing you how to achieve this mono strap bustier top. So this is going to be a sleeveless top and I'll be making use of a princess bustier. So I already have my vertical measurement imputed, but I'll go through it. So this is going to serve as the shoulder line. So from the shoulder line to this line is called the chest line, which is 8.5 inches. This is the bust point, which is 10 inches. This is the under bust, which is 13 inches, and this is the waist. So I'll be drafting the front panel first, and the pattern paper is on fold. So the next thing I'm going to do is to impute the horizontal measurement. So on this chest line, I'm going to impute 1/4 of the bust circumference, and 1/4 of the bust circumference is 10 inches. So I'm going to mark 10 inches here. And on the under bust, I'm going to impute 1/4 of the under bust circumference, which is 8 inches. And on the waist, I'm going to impute 1/4 of the waist circumference. That's 8.5 inches. I'll mark 8.5 here. So I'm going to connect. So I'll be making use of a princess bustier. So to achieve this, I need to impute the dart. So I'm going to impute the bust pan measurement. So the bust pan I'm working with is 7 inches. Divided by 2 will be 3.5 plus ½ inch seam allowance. So that will give me 4 inches. So I'm going to mark 4 inches all the way up onto the waist. So from here to here is 4 inches, which is my bust pan measurement. So to impute the dart, on the under bust, I'm going to impute 1.5 inches for the dart. So I'll mark 1.5 inches here, and on the waist I'll mark the same thing, 1.5 inches, and I'll connect with a straight line. Then I'm going to create the cuff. So I'll place my cuff this way and connect. So the next thing I'm going to do is to work on the shoulder. So for the shoulder measurement, I'll be imputing half of the shoulder measurement minus 1 inch because this is a sleeveless top. So half of the shoulder measurement I'm working with is 7 inches minus 1 inch, that's 6 inches. So I'm going to place the 6 inches this way. And on this 6 inches, I'm going to drop down by ½ inch for the shoulder slant. So for the neck width, I'll be making use of 4 inches. Then I'll have 2 inches left here. So if you notice from the picture, the shoulder strap left isn't so wide. So by the time I'm done sewing and attaching my lining, I'll be having about 1.5 inches left here. So from this 4 inches, I'm going to connect to the slant. So for the neck depth, I'll make use of 5 inches. So I'm going to connect from here to this 5 inches. So I'm going to connect to the chest line, but I must make sure I have 6 inches here. So I mark 6 inches here. Then I'll connect with a straight line to the chest line. So to properly get the armhole curve, I'll be taking the midpoint of this line, which is 4 inches, and I'll come in by ½ inch. Then I'll connect with my curve all the way from here up until this point. So to achieve the princess dart, I'm going to measure what I have at the armhole curve here. So whatever I have, I'll divide it by 2 and mark the midpoint. So I'll place my tape this way. And I have 11 inches, so I'm going to mark 5.5, which is half of 11 inches. So I'll mark 5.5 here. So this is the midpoint of this armhole curve. So from this marking here, I'll be connecting to the bust point to achieve my princess bustier. So to avoid gaping or bulginess, I'll be taking armhole darts. So I'm going to step down here by ½ inch and step up here by ½ inch, and I'll connect to the bust point. So I'm going to place my tape this way. I'll mark ½ inch here, ½ inch here. Then I'll connect from here all the way to the bust point, and I'll do the same thing to this side. Now that I'm done imputing the dart, the next thing to do is to replace the dart. So whatever amount of dart you take, you need to replace it. So if you don't replace the dart, you'll be having a shortage on this panel. So I'm going to calculate what I took as the dart. So I took ½ inch here, ½ inch here. That will give me 1 inch. So I'm going to replace the dart on this panel. So on this line, I'm going to extend it by 1 inch. I'll place my tape this way. And whatever I have, I usually add ½ inch to the dart allowance. So I'm going to extend it by ½ inch. That will be 1½ inch. So it's better to have an excess, and after sewing, you cut it out. So the next thing I'm going to do is now to create a new armhole curve. So I'll take my French curve, and this is now the new armhole we'll be working with. Now I'm done drafting out the princess bustier. So the next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and add the seam allowances. So on this line, on the chest line, I'll measure what I have here. This is 3/4 inch. I'll be adding it plus 2 inches seam allowance. So that will give me 2 3/4. And on the under bust, I'll measure what I have here, which is 1½ inches plus 2 inches seam allowance. So that will give me 3½ inches. On the waist, I have 1½ inches also plus 2 inches seam allowance. So that will be 3½ inches. So I'll be connecting these markings. Then I'll be adding ½ inch seam allowance to the shoulder. So the next thing I'm going to do is to cut this out. So after cutting, this is how it looks like. I'll be opening it up to achieve the mono strap. So I'm just going to place this way, and this is going to be like this. And I'll place it down with my tape, and I'll do the same thing to this other end. So the next thing to do is to determine where you want the one shoulder or the mono strap to be. So I'm going to retain here as the one shoulder, and here will be off. So with a slight curve, I'll be connecting from here all the way to this armhole curve. So this is my chest line. So I'll just do something like this. Then I can properly connect now with my curve. So now that I've achieved this, I'm going to cut this out. So the next thing I'm going to do is to achieve the design or the cutout that we have that starts from around here all the way to the shoulder. So from the picture, you will notice that the cutout or the design started from about 2 inches after the midpoint. So from there, you just freestyle and get a kind of curve all the way up until about 3/4 or ½ inch to the shoulder. So it doesn't get to the end of the shoulder. So I'm just going to try and achieve something close to the design. So you can feel free to make any design of your choice. So I'll be stepping down. This is the midpoint here. I'll come down by 2 inches here at this point. Then I'll go like this. And stop about ½ inch to the shoulder, and I'm going to come like this also, something like this, and just draw all the way to meet this end. So I have something close to what's on the picture, but if you can do it better than me, please go ahead and do that. So another thing to note is that you need to be mindful of what you're going to cut out from here, because after cutting and you turn with your lining, you will notice that this space you have here will end up being bigger. So you just need to be mindful of this part in order not to make it so wide. So the front panel is ready, so I'm just going to cut this out. So this is our beautiful front panel. Now we're going to move over to the back panel. So this is for the back panel, and I have a zipper allowance here of 1 inch. So this is going to serve as the shoulder line. This is the bust point, the underbust, and the waist. So for the back panel, you could choose to use a waist dart or a princess dart, but I'll be making use of a waist dart. So like I did for the front, I'm going to impute the bust pan measurement. So I'm going to place 4 inches here, and I'll connect with a straight line. So the next thing I'm going to do is on the waist here, I'm going to mark the darts. I will take ½ inch here on the left and ½ inch on the right side, and on the bust point I'm going to come up by 1 inch, and I'll connect from this point to this dart, and from here to this dart. So for the shoulder, I'm going to mark 6 inches just like I did for the front. So the front and the back should be the same thing. So this 6 inches is half of the shoulder measurement minus 1 inch because it's a sleeveless top. Then from this 6 inches, I'm going to come down by ½ inch for my shoulder slant. From this shoulder slant, I'll be marking 8 inches, which will be my chest line. So I'll make sure I also have 6 inches here. Then I'll connect with the straight line. So for the neck width, the front and back must be the same thing. So I'm going to mark 4 inches here. Just the same thing I did for the front. So for the neck depth, I'm going to take 2 inches. And I'm going to connect from here to this 2 inches. And from these 4 inches, I'll connect to the shoulder slant. So on the chest line, I'm going to impute 1/4 of the bust circumference, which is 10 inches, plus 2 inches seam allowance. And on the underbust, I'm going to impute 1/4 of the underbust circumference, which is 8 inches. And I have 3/4 of an inch here. I'm going to replace it plus 2 inches. So I'm going to add 2 3/4. Then 1/4 of the waist circumference is 8.5 inches plus 1 inch darts and 2 inches seam allowance. So that will give me 3 inches. So the next thing I'm going to do is to connect this mark. So for the armhole curve, I'm just going to take the midpoint, which is 4 inches, and I'll get my curve and connect to this point. So now we're done with the back panel. The next thing for me to do is to cut out. So this is how the back looks like. So the next thing I'm going to do is to place the front on top of the back to get the monostrap. So I'm going to assume that this is the right side of the pattern. So I also went ahead to secure the zipper allowance with a pin. So I'll open up like this. So this is going to be the wrong side of the pattern. Where I have my marking is going to be the right side of the pattern. So I'll place the front panel on top of the back panel. So here is going to serve as the right side of the panel, and here is going to be the wrong side of the pattern. So I'll place it shoulder to shoulder just like this. And the next thing I'm going to do is to trace out this to get the monostrap. So before you trace out, you have to make sure you lap this side panel on top of this. You come in with ½ of an inch. So why do I say so? If you don't lap this panel on top of this, by the time you're done tracing on the back panel and you sew up the front, you'll find out that the back panel will be bigger than the front panel. So it's better this side panel laps ½ inch inwards on top of the middle panel before you cut out. So the next thing I'm going to do is just to trace out this way. So I'll just take the front panel off and I'll cut out this part. So this is the back panel. So you could go ahead and split the back panel into two from the zipper allowance. So we've come to the end of this tutorial and I hope this video was helpful. Please like, share and subscribe.